It's really a pleasure, and we're so lucky to have today Professor J. Tuomas Harviainen, who is a professor of information studies and interactive media at Tampere University in Finland, as well as you have other positions in other places, but that would be your main disciplinary sort of position. So you have been a scholar of many things: simulations, games, sexuality, and you have also worked in consulting. So you know sort of the value of working in the private sector, which is something that neoliberal institutions really appreciate. Sorry, I had to include that, but I'll beat it if that's a problem. When I read your research interests, I'm always fascinated. Information practices, customer value, games as business phenomena, information systems and information seeking, marginalized sexualities, organizational learning, and public sector strategies. That's why it was so great when you said, I can come and give a talk because I'm passing by. And I just knew that we just had to say yes, because whatever you brought up to the table was going to be fun and entertaining and enlightening for all of us. But when you decided to talk about the Finnish game development community and how they share information, I thought that's exactly the topic that fits for us and for our audience. So thank you so much for being here, and yes, the floor is yours.
Thank you for having me here. Yes, hello, I'm Tuomas. I know some people in the audience already, and I hope this may be seen by a few students more at a later time. So my topic is information sharing and design coordination. I could have talked about open innovation or topics like this. We'll return to this within the Finnish game development community, and this is based on sort of early observations we made a decade ago about maybe the Finnish development scene being slightly different from others, and I'm happy to have that point contested if you disagree or saying like actually we have the same thing in Denmark. So yes, prove me wrong, that's science, but we'll go with this. So very quickly, as Miguel said, I am Professor of Information Studies and Interactive Media. Comes from the old name of our discipline when information scholars and game studies scholars were in the same unit and the same discipline at Tampere University, and I sort of like it because even though I am technically and also sort of from my research perspective very much first an information scholar, then maybe a design scholar, and I just happen to study games as phenomena. I'm lucky enough to be in the same corridors as the game studies people, so I get to poach their doctoral students like could we co-author a paper or something like this. So we do it. I call myself a hang-around member of the Tampere Game Lab. I did my own doctorate in games as sort of writing about games as information systems, especially focusing on role-playing studies and the way in which within the highly contested magic circle of live action role play you have weird stuff like ephemeral documents. So what happens to document theory if I hand you the king's letter here and you receive it? We sort of know what's there, but it doesn't exist anywhere, and when the game ends, the document vanishes. So toying with those topics. What I'm talking about today is connected to stuff I do at Aalto University. As a sideline, I've wanted to study design management for a long time. Sort of how do we manage creative individuals and creative processes? You don't have literature on that, so we started looking into this kind of phenomena, and that led to this research I'm presenting today. And why you should listen maybe to me on the topic is I've edited the International Journal of Role Playing, and then for another 5 years simulation and gaming before the current editorial team. My sort of game research background is not in the DIGRA related community. I come from the ISAGA, International Simulation and Gaming side of things, who were 30 years old when Espen said that this is year 0 of game studies, and I keep reminding him of this. Yes. My main research topics, in addition to this, I study drug trading on the dark web. That's most of my research. Would have made probably for an interesting lecture as well, gather maybe double the number of people here. Information's role in game development and design, so what we're talking about today. And then I, as a hobby project, study non-monogamies. And I have on principle written 2 papers about rock and roll also, so that I get sex, drugs and rock and roll on my platform. I am one of the 2 people in Finland who have peer-reviewed research on all 3. So if someone tells you library science is boring, do not believe them. So what I will be talking about, this is part of a much larger research project where we've been looking into first the collocation of creative industries. So what happens when enough actors in the field congregate in the same cities or other hubs? What kind of value creation networks they have, and sort of what kind of networks do people in these communities consider that they have? How they share information, this is the sort of special thing about the Finnish context, and sort of what happens on the organizational level of sharing and what happens on the interpersonal level of sharing. As an information scholar, this has been kind of the key question for me. And finally, what kind of innovation processes or phenomena arise when people have all of this happening at the same time? Quick nod to people I've been working with. So the idea here has been that Professor Miikka J. Lehtonen, who is now at the College of Design in Tokyo, the 2 of us have been working on this since 2015. And the idea is that for each research project or paper, or both, we have 1 or 2 other collaborators. So we do the basic thing. Miikka is really good at producing efficient text. I then comment and sort of beat it senseless until it makes sense. So we've had Professor Rainamo from Tallinn Technical University, Vice Rector Søren Koch from Hanken, who's been very influential for this work recently, a doctoral student Katarina from Turku on resilient values of the industry. So how on earth is the Finnish community able to keep on to its practices and openness while companies are being acquired by, let's say, Chinese buyers? So why do things persist? And then Professor Mikko Vesa from Hanken, with whom we've written about games as disservice. So how does value co-destruction happen on game platforms? I may return to it if there is time. So this is a longitudinal research project. We started with just sort of, we might want to look at this. And Miikka acquired the first interviews, so 23 top informant, sort of expert informants from the game industry in Finland or around it. Then I did a quick round of 20 interviews a few years later, sort of asking people, especially during parties or other sort of community events, during just the first hour, because I did not want the informants to be drunk, or at least not so drunk that there would have been ethical problems. I see what you're doing there. Yes. So very quickly, just asking, are you still engaging in this kind of open information sharing? What are you getting? Are there limits? A couple of minutes are usually enough to get the key answers from people who are not sort of in the positions where they would feel comfortable in sharing very long explanations about the situation, but it was great for triangulating the kind of answers. Can we really trust on what's being said? Reviewers don't like it when you say that I interviewed people for 2 minutes. So yes, but it has led to stuff. So we interviewed 15 of the 23 again in 18 to 20. Then we've been following the scene, and then this year, to build the next papers, we interviewed the 14 of the 15 again, and I think Miikka is having probably next week the last missing interview. I think that's a really nice data set when you have the same people answering every 5 years or so. And the central concept here is coopetition. I don't know if you're familiar with it. This is a business management term for a situation where 2 or more companies both compete and collaborate at the same time. So the important thing here is that they are engaging in this practice simultaneously. It can be organization-wide, so sort of these 2 game companies are working together to widen the market abroad. But it can also be such that, okay, we are competing on the design and engineering level while our marketing departments are doing stuff together. But there has to be this kind of strong tension. The companies need to know that they are still competitors at the end of the day. And on the other hand, it requires a lot of trust, because you are sharing stuff with the others, you are taking risks together, and even if just one company in such a deal in a larger community would default suddenly, they would defect in a very classical game theory sense, then everything comes crashing down. The idea is that sort of the competition between the companies brings this kind of drive, forward momentum, the need to excel, and the collaboration brings synergies into the game. This has been studied in business sciences since the late 80s at the very least. Example industries has been Scottish knitwork, Swedish textiles, the Finnish game design companies we are studying, and most recently craft breweries, which do a very similar thing to these game companies with the idea like let's collaborate. They realize that they are not fighting against the other craft brew developers. Their competition is the bulk mainstream stuff, so they're widening the market share for everyone because everyone basically benefits from it. This can be very leaning towards doing a lot of collaboration, as in the case of the Finnish companies, or it can be like you're on occasion doing stuff. This would include, for instance, small companies joining up to fight the regulations on Apple Store in order to sort of make room for everyone and make the deal better. It can be temporary, or it can, as in the case of the Finnish game companies, be a long-term thing. Then I will quickly explain the Finnish context a bit wider. I've been talking about this topic in a lot of places over these years, and quite often people have been saying like, I don't know any Finnish games, is the industry big at all? And then I sort of show this picture and say that you probably know these games, but you did not maybe know like which one is Finland produced. So these are some of the hits, from Angry Birds to Supercell's games to Max Payne, which sort of counts as a classic at this time, and the Housemarque's newer games here as well. So the setting of our research, the Finnish scene, they call it the scene, skene. A lot of diverse game companies with highly divergent products / services, since a lot of this is produced as a kind of games as a service situation. If we look at the market, it's very typical that there are strong brands and very few copycat industries. So if we compare to some other countries, I'm going to get comments from colleagues later on, but Poland being a good example, where you would have designs that are very similar to other existing designs, not in everywhere, but still. But in this case, there are very few copycats. I know one company that is basically doing stuff based purely on metrics, like this sells, we make this kind of game. But in general, there's this strong feel of like we have a unique product, even if we are part of an international company, but the subsidiaries in Finland try to do something that's remarkably different. And this is a part of why this community exists. The companies can be of very different maturity levels, so the same kind of practices that I will be describing are engaged with by both startups and these biggest companies. So it doesn't happen so often, but if you would go to an Game Developers Association's meeting, you might find the CEO of Rovio explaining key practices to people who are just about to enter the industry. So there's this kind of very flat feel to everything, and people seem to be they enjoy helping the newcomers along. This means also usually very good relationships between indie and AAA producers, for instance. So there isn't kind of a cultural huge divide. One of the reasons that sort of I will return to shortly is that a lot of these people are old friends. The ones who run the companies, they know each other probably from the demo scene of the 80s or so, and they're open with each other. So this sort of trickles down, using intentionally this expression. So kind of this friendliness is sort of expected. Then we have relatively high staff mobility. The downturns in the industry's profits have affected this to some extent. But in general, your average game company worker of any type spends 2 to 4 years in one of the firms and then moves on. So it means that very few things remain secrets for a long time. And as I already mentioned, the resilient values persist. So this kind of openness, supposed friendliness, not creating conflicts out of things that can be more smoothly resolved, stays as part of the community. And when people come in to the scene from other countries and cultures, they are very quickly introduced to this kind of friendliness and openness, which I will be talking about next. Some very interesting phenomena that I would love to research more exist in a sort of similar, very low, hyper-local practices in Poland and apparently in the Indian indie development scene. But so far, finding funding for looking at these phenomena has been a problem. So if anyone wants to go there and has the money, we're happy to share, in the spirit of Finnish coopetition, our ideas so that we could get comparison data. So this is the core of the interviews. The 23, then 15 plus 15 people have been asked to draw pictures of their ecosystem. This is just one example from the first set, sort of who are you in connections with and in competition with and so forth. And then combined to this, a longer interview of 40 to 90 minutes has produced really rich data. So before I go into the practices of coopetition, here are sort of our core findings from earlier work. The reasons why this kind of tension yet friendliness exists, we have identified numerous points. So first of all, the demo scene myth. It acts as a kind of a foundational story on which they can build. Sort of, the founders were in this together, so everyone is, and this is taught to the new people. I have there this bossy share we can do kind of idea, which is tacitly accepted by the company. So they know their staff will be open about the information. And two examples have been, for instance, when a company acquired a very major IP to develop, they told their staff directly, and we have this on quote, this time you will not engage in the normal typical information sharing. Can't be more clear than that. And with IGDA having an anniversary party in Tampere, the key speaker, who was the director, said, I hope this information sharing culture continues. So it's sort of recognized constantly that it's there, and it's part of the Finnish way of doing this stuff. The practical key, number one key reason for why it persists is that everyone realizes that Finland is too small a market. So they have the myth, but they have also market realities. They know that you don't want to compete on the Finnish market, and if you are competing on the global market, then you are competing against the giants. So this we're the David together against the international Goliath is also a phrase directly from the data. So they're trying to expand the market for everyone, and they are doing it together because it makes a lot more sense than making enemies at home. This is, as you probably all know, a passion industry, so people are really proud usually about their works, at least if they have had a good experience developing the stuff, and it shows also in the celebrations, which sort of are the focal points here. So you would have a monthly party of the scene, especially in Helsinki, the capital region, where one company will sponsor something. They will show their most recent project, either pre or post-launch, tell about stuff that they have been doing. Everyone else is there, and sort of they're talking about the stuff that they love. And since they do not have NDAs, or if they do, those are very, very flexible, people engage in shop talk. And they talk about the stuff that they love, which are the games they are making or have been making. So a lot of know-how and sort of business insight is shared between individuals. The companies recognize the value of this, they permit it, and the information is brought in, and they are able to not waste a lot of time creating game designs that someone else is already developing and is probably way ahead. So they kill ideas very early on because they are able to coordinate by knowing what the competition is doing. So this is a great example of sort of systemic market diversification. They avoid overlaps, and they also avoid certain sort of design problems with it. And this openness goes so far that it is completely normal and seen as normal and as accepted that if one company, especially a startup, hits a sort of snag and they need some expertise, they can call a friend in a competing company. Or there have been cases, I got this from interviewing two HR managers from two different companies, that sometimes the companies even lend their staff to the competition. So sort of, we have this programming problem, we don't know how to solve it. Okay, we have a guy who knows how to do this. You get to have him for 2 weeks. He'll solve it, and then he returns back here. And this works because sort of at the moment, as said, the competition is elsewhere. This means they bring knowledge of the other companies' best practices with them, and maybe also their design ideas and insight. And this is seen as a positive thing. But it's also seen as part of the practice. There's a very strong we're in this together kind of feel to all of it, and helping a friend out is a part of this. There is a kind of dark shade behind this, so you're not allowed to recruit at these events, but you are completely allowed to present, for instance, like our company would be a really good employer in case you happen to want to switch a year from now on, kind of thing. And when headhunts do happen, they are sort of glossed over, like we're not having any bad blood over this. We're really angry about you taking our best expert here, but it is not the habit of this community to fight over stuff. And this means that open problems are extremely rare, even though sometimes they are not happy that a person jumps ship too early. But as said, the expectation that no one stays a long time unless they have a huge investment or a top leading position in a company, then mobility is sort of expected already. We know about competition that sort of smaller companies do it rather flexibly, especially the startups. They engage much more strongly in this information sharing, or I should say more easily in it, and part of it is that it becomes rather boring if you have only 2 people in the office and that's all you get to talk to. So getting to talk about the stuff that you do and you love with others is important. The larger companies seem to need a strategy. This is known from the other fields of where co-opetition also takes place. And because of this, the larger companies try compartmentalizing it. So being open about, we do not share design stuff unless on special permission, but we will engage in working together on the marketing side. They are doing risk assessments. Sort of Finland is a culture of very high trust generally, so people do tend to keep up what they promise, but here companies, especially if they have international investors involved, they need to sort of show that they are thinking about the trust possibilities. So in a sense we can say that on one side they are doing their best to keep the shareholders happy, and here they are like sharing everything, especially after the first beer. So while drunk, there are no business secrets is a Finnish saying, and same way as in Japan, you count as being drunk after you've had 1 beer. So this happens here too. You have the excuse of it, and yeah. Very quickly, I will introduce some points of design information flow, which is part of this. I will not go into too deeply into this. So we have the kind of first, the companies share open information, keeping stakeholders happy. If they are owned by shareholders, then basically you have to report certain things. Usually this kind of design-related information is shared between partners so that they would reach a consensus. Not here, they just openly give stuff away. As I mentioned, the problem fixes, we have a lot of the shop talk, and then very interestingly, sort of this kind of open sharing between individuals is usually not sort of quid pro quo. it doesn't go like I will tell you something and you will then tell me what I need to know or want to know, but instead it's like I'm gonna tell you about stuff and you're gonna say something about your things to the next persons, and systemically at some point I will hear interesting stuff. So this is how it really works. And we've seen examples of companies that have decided to withdraw, and they do not do as well. So sort of innovation gets stifled if you are not engaging in this company because others are engaging it. I'm gonna simply skip that. The paper I cite here, so by Claudia Eckert and colleagues, they've been studying information flow issues in design, especially engineering, and what we have looked at are the kind of factors that impede design information's movement in organizations. For instance, people do not know what needs to be done. They don't know why certain decisions were done. And this is where the information sharing comes really nicely in. Sort of in the shop talk, people usually tell sort of why we did this and this kind of thing. They share application information and stuff on sort of how everything is applied. With the company, you get feedback on stuff. You can early on sort of unofficially tell about your design ideas and see if the people who are really experts, who are at the same table with the beers in their hand, if they feel enthusiastic about the stuff or not. So you get feedback, you get updates. You have the flat or semi-flat power hierarchies, so it isn't just the bosses who are in the know about what is happening, it's everyone, and you are probably talking over these hierarchical lines as well. Information withholding does happen, and it's known as a key sort of obstruction to this process, but it's really rare. We have a couple of major companies, Supercell is especially known for this, that are more restrictive in the information sharing. You sort of need to know someone from within to get to know the stuff, but apparently then you get to know it still. So it's just slightly more exclusive. And a few others. There are always startups that have people who think their ideas will be stolen, but in general, sort of open sharing about the ideas is seen as also a competitive mechanism, because if people know what you are doing, same as in many places in academia, then sort of you have marked the claim on the topic. We know that this person is doing stuff, and if you would do a copycat paper with the same idea, it would lead likely to people who are in the know saying that sort of this looks very much like your stolen person X's idea. So this is a kind of community policing thing as well. Yes. Other sort of flow problems, information might get oversimplified, not here because people are sharing usually expert topics. So and they're allowed to ask. So sort of if someone explains a small design thing, the programmers will make more questions because they are curious, and they are allowed to share stuff. So we don't have a lot of inexperienced intermediaries, or if we do, if it's the marketing guy who tells you what they're doing, then if it sounds interesting, you're allowed to go to talk to the people who do the actual coding, and then you can find out for yourself. And finally, yes, because sort of everyone knows what is being done, they know the industry and so forth, you also have sort of the sufficient context for interpreting what has been shared, and people who are able to act as messengers on what is being done. And this is important for this because the companies do not completely engage in this out of the goodness of their hearts in being good employers. They also do it because people are expected to bring home the knowledge that they gain. So this is, okay, my slides are really jumping. So they are, in the words of organization research, sort of doing both the exploration for new ideas at the events, and they are doing the exploitation where what you learn is shared in the company. Because if it stays with the individuals, then it is not useful for the company. But if you have heard this, if you are a so-called super encounterer, as they are called in information studies, the person who is open to hearing stuff, hearing the industry gossip, you bring it and you share it at least in the coffee room or water cooler of your workplace, and then it makes its way up, and the company is able to diversify and focus on its pure strength. So we have this kind of organizational sharing on the top level, as I mentioned, to especially shareholders. We have this kind of community post-promotion, so people telling, we did this great game and like this, and wouldn't you like to be the next ones who are making such games with us? We have the critical tips like fixing the bugs and so forth. Externalization of knowledge, trying to explain to others what's been done so that everyone would benefit. The shop talk, and so forth. And when new companies enter this field, so when people do a spin-off or a startup, they are already in this culture. So they know sort of this is how we are expected to perform. So they do not form kinds of obstructions on this culture, but rather sort of people come through this mill and they know that this openness is expected. And as I mentioned, some withholding may happen. So the information environment here in general, so it's very dynamic. It's based on what's happening in the field, what people are doing, what is interesting to talk about. So for the most part, unless it's a special occasion, it's a kind of feeling on your feet, sort of, I can talk about this. This is happening right now. So very much this kind of non-planned openness. As I mentioned already, it's asymmetrical, so we don't tell each other stuff in order to learn from each other. We sort of throw information in the air in the community, and it's expected to serve us in the long run as well. It relies on everyone or almost everyone sharing. If the company people would notice that there would be a few people from a certain company who are listening very closely, but they are not sharing anything, this would immediately lead to a kind of community ostracism, which doesn't serve the people well. So you don't want to be the bad player here. You don't want to steal the ideas either. You don't want to do copycat designs. You want to do something that's recognized. All this creates the necessary tension that reminds the companies, even as they are very, very collaborative, that they are competing on the market at the end of the day, and within these last few years being financially not as successful for most of them. Some companies are still thriving, but many others aren't so much. The tension is coming out a bit more. And on the sharing context, still we also have this kind of general common interest in getting good results. It means that people in competing companies want to see the other companies also producing stuff. A direct quote from the interviews, and there were many similar, was that I want to be really wowed by the stuff that the other people in this scene are doing. They want to see interesting stuff. They also want to see others prosper. We have this lovely quote from a person from a very established, high up in a very established company, who said like, oh, we have this new game startup in the same apartment building where we have our own office. And I really hope that this scene will be able to propel them to international success. If that isn't the right kind of spirit, I don't know what is. And they do expect that there is the wow. So if that tiny company goes to a mega success with an uninteresting game idea, then that will create probably more frowns than serial failure. So there is kind of this super pride also of doing just impressive stuff in this community. So here's a direct citation from the material. Two interviewees at the same time. This is a much longer quote all in all. So honestly, we can ask each other favors even on a big level. Just information is shared. It's usually not in the sense that we'll get a document printed out like here's this information we know, but it's always more or less in a bar. How did you guys do that? Saunas are very important here as well. Yeah, they go to sauna together, or and then they'll be like, talk to this guy, he'll let you know. We know our barriers to cross. We know what not really talk about, but compared to other industries globally, we are much more relaxed. And this is the feel that comes through all these interview sets. We have a couple of people in the 15 who sort of slightly grumble, but they seem to still have internalized this approach as well, at least on the level of it being the expectation. So our key findings. The free sharing seems to be very advantageous if the context is trust safe and prideful. So it works as long as no one breaks the tacit rules. As long as people sort of have an innate kind of feel what they can and can't share, when they share and how much. And the context needs to be not just trust safe or high trust, it needs to be prideful. There has to be the pride in the game that we are making, being happy about the community's results, your results, sharing it, sharing also the potential failures, which in this industry do happen quite a lot. So having this kind of, we celebrate the stuff, we are proud in it, so it works. Personal connections are important for sharing. You don't throw the ideas around complete strangers probably, but if you do know the others at least to some extent, then you are more open to it and the atmosphere is more conductive. So people may say that it's completely open sharing, but it is based on also at least some in the group where you are talking about the stuff being familiar. So there's probably two wannabes and one student there, and then the people I know, but that's enough for sort of it to feel safe enough. People need to have sufficient skills to act as mediators. This means that in order to be able to utilize this kind of passionate shop talk, you need to have the necessary skills to be able to use it. So this is to some extent a protective mechanism in it. Sort of, you need to be a sort of high-end programmer, for instance, to understand why certain tips are valuable or why certain fixes are important. So the ones who can't use the information can't use it because they don't realize its real value. Super encounters, which I mentioned, are very valuable. The people who will also remember the next day what stuff was received, and they are willing to tell it further in the community. This kind of, we encounter information now and then we put it to use in a few months. So you get an insight like, okay, this is now valuable. So you do not just pass the information sort of as a kind of light shop talk. You keep it in mind, you retain it, and you strategically use it in your own organization. So learning this kind of storage use practices means they make the difference between a random talking partner and the ones who are really putting this to good use. And this way you have kind of information reserves you can use. When the time comes, you will know that Mary from that company is the one who knows how to solve this problem, or oh, they did this in that game, kind of thing. This needs to go throughout the company. So unless there is a very strategic limitation in bigger companies, the idea is that sort of it has to go through, and if it's possible because the bosses are open, but in general you can't have these segments of it who would not share. So as opposed to certain other industries, for instance, HR people, even the top HR people, are completely in on this culture. You see them at the same events and they will engage in similar shop talk. When they're among each other, then they will probably talk about HR things. But that's also very valuable knowledge in this industry. And yes, internal resharing, strongly expected, meaning you bring the stuff home, you tell it to others, and then it can be also way more strategic telling, or it can be, again, something that happens in the coffee room. Now, everything I've been telling you about has been holding water for the last decade and a bit more, but a big part of it has been a success period for these companies. We are now seeing that the profits are dwindling down, fewer games are becoming these big hits. It takes extra effort to just maintain the success of stuff that you are already have on the market as a kind of a service model, for instance. So it might be that if really push comes to shove and the industry has to sort of have a lot more setbacks, then this friendliness will vanish, and all it really would take is one major player to break off from this tacit understanding that this is good. And that might come also from the fact that if the next big company gets sold and withdraws, it might happen as well. As we argue in our paper in Games and Culture on resilient values, the community has been really good at resisting these pulls so far, but we never know. So as researchers, we just try to get the facts out as quickly as possible. So here are some select references, stuff where we have published on this from our oldest community data work with Miikka in 2016. The 4 central papers are there at the top, and if I remember correctly, open access available as well. We have 2 lovely little spin-offs, so one of them studying sort of people's purchasing practices related to these kinds of games. So the complete data set is roughly the same, and then there's our games as disservice, sort of how people are kept using especially mobile games. But I could talk for another half an hour and then Miguel will miss his bus. So thank you for listening, and I would love to hear any questions.